Hello everyone and welcome to Oriana Unlock. I am Oriana and on this channel we are going to be diving deep in order to unlock new knowledge about topics that truly matter. And today we're going to be unlocking the ultimate superpower in my opinion, which is the art of persuasion. Whether you want to lead a movement, you want to pitch an idea, or you just want to change the world, you need to know how to move people with your words. And today's guest teaches the world's most powerful how to do just that. I am incredibly honored to welcome to our channel none other than Professor Gary Orren, an authority on public opinion, leadership, and persuasion. For more than 50 years, Professor Orren has served as the VOK Junior Professor of Politics and Leadership at none other than Harvard University. Apart from Harvard, he has also taught at Oxford University in England and at the University of Switzerland. Professor Orren played a foundational role in creating the very first US news media poll for the New York Times and CBS News. He has drafted the actual rules for US presidential nomination process and served as an expert analyst for ABC television. He is also a regular contributor to publications such as the New York Times and the Washington Post. Professor Orren is also the teacher behind Leaders, the world's most influential figures of our time, like former US President Barack Obama, have sat in his classroom to master what he calls the science and art of persuasion. So everyone, please join me in welcoming none other than Professor Gary Orren. Professor Orren, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is truly an honor to have you here on Oriana Unlock in order to unlock the secrets behind persuasion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Oriana. It is really my privilege. It is my honor to be with you today. I look forward to our conversation.
So thank you so much for being here. Professor Orren, my first question is, you obviously define persuasion as a fascinating intersection. For those of us who are just beginning to study this topic, should we understand persuasion as a science based on data and psychology, or is it still an art that depends purely on intuition and personality?
Well, I think that it is a mixture of both. It is a hybrid. There actually are some very, very powerful scientific principles that lie behind effective persuasion, human behavior that we pull out of social psychology, political science, communication theory, and the like. But it is also an art. It is definitely also an art. And the people who are most effective at it combine both the science and the art together to accomplish what they hope to accomplish.
Based on your decades of research at Harvard University, what are those fundamental principles or pillars that everyone should master to be effective in communicating an idea?
Well, there are quite a number of them. I will just mention a few. Incidentally, I think all the principles I say in my writings and in my speaking, that all the principles are common sense. They're common sense. We know them, okay? They're just not common practice. They're just not common practice. And so we want to turn that common sense into common practice to yield our results. I'll give you an example, Oriana, of a few principles. One of the powerful principles is the simplicity principle. I call it the simplicity principle. It says that simple and clear messages are much more persuasive than complex and unclear messages. And I hope you say to yourself right now, well, sure, of course, yes, I can understand that, but it's mostly violated by good, talented, energetic, dedicated leaders and managers. They know it's true intellectually, but doing it is quite another matter. Okay, in school, we take an examination. It says, why did the Roman Empire fall in a history course? Okay, and we write for an hour or two all the reasons, as much as we can write to try to get in that hour as the reasons. And then we let the instructor find the gems, the jewels in all our writing. We maybe get an A in school, but we don't get an A in the real world if we use that kind of approach. The world, other people are not our editors. They don't edit what we have to say. We need to be able to speak in clear and short, relatively short, brief, digestible amounts of information that will really move people. Um, that is partly, it's based upon science. We see if we communicate 6, 7, 8, 9 points, that our audience really doesn't retain and doesn't recollect those a week from now, 2 weeks from now, right? There's a principle I talk about in class often, which is the rule of three. Try to keep our points, if we can, to one, two, or three key things that we want our audience to recall. So that's the simplicity principle. One of the most important principles is knowing the audience and its predispositions. Someone you want to persuade, really walking a mile in their moccasins, get into their shoes, get into their head, understand what they think. We know what we think is important, okay? And just repeating that over and over again and calling that persuasion, that's not persuading the other side. We need to understand where they're coming, what's salient to them, what's important to them, what they really care about. And we need to communicate in ways not only what we think, but also what the audience thinks. And we find that most of the time, this is really a question of empathy. We've heard the word empathy, being empathetic, which is not being sympathetic. It's not agreeing with our audience. That's what most people think empathy is really sympathy. No, empathy is, even if I disagree strongly with you, I want to understand where you're coming from, what you think. That's the empathy part. Okay. And if I cannot convey to you that I understand your perspective, I usually am going to be very unsuccessful in persuasion, okay, in moving you. It's a key first step. I'll mention one other principle, the counterintuitive principle, I call it, the surprise principle. Surprising information, surprising messages that I give to you can be very persuasive, something you don't expect, something that deviates from your expectations. Because basically your brain doesn't want to be persuaded. Your brain wants to keep what it thinks as it is, nice and stable and steady, right? In order to let go, if I tell you something novel, something fresh, something surprising, your brain says to itself, oh, I wasn't an idiot to think X. Gary wants me to think Y. I can more easily let go with some kind of new, novel, fresh, surprising information, right? So those are three. There are several more of these key principles. I'll mention just one other quickly. We call the reciprocity principle. I'm more likely to persuade you if I've given you something. Now, it may be a tangible thing that I give you, such as if you're in a grocery store, maybe they give you a free sample of some cookies or some product, and in order to encourage you, stimulate you to be persuaded. But it may be something that's intangible, like respect and admiration and things like that. The reciprocity principle, you're more likely to persuade somebody if you have given them something, and they will be more likely to reciprocate back and be more available for your persuasion. Those are some of the key principles of persuasion.
From your perspective at Harvard, where do you draw the ethical line that separates persuading with integrity to manipulating others?
Oh, it's a very, very good question. The big M question, the manipulation question. When does it turn into unethical persuasion? Because I want people to be effective in persuading other people, and not just effective, but also ethical in their persuasion efforts. The key distinction, I think, Oriana, is that you do not intentionally mislead the audience. You do not intentionally deceive the audience. If you will, it's a harsh word, you do not lie to the audience. Say something you do not believe to be true, right? Okay, we look for truthfulness. We don't always find the truth. We aspire to tell the truth, but we at least we can be truthful, say what we really believe to be the case. When you are not truthful, when you mislead and deceive the audience, that is really the borderline between good persuasion, ethical persuasion, and unethical persuasion.
Professor Orren, why is it so difficult to persuade certain people despite presenting them with logical and irrefutable facts? What are the most common psychological obstacles we face?
I think the biggest obstacle is that people cling to what they already think, their predispositions. We take very seriously what we already think. You're not talking to somebody that's a blank slate. They have ideas, they have values, they have judgments already, and they cling to know and cling to those things really quite tenaciously. We really cling to them tenaciously. And that's why we need to have empathy to understand what are those things people are clinging to, and that might help us to turn some of those views to our side, turn our side. And we usually turn people to our side, by the way, Oriana, not by telling them something brand new, but by tapping into what you already think in your head on some subject, but putting it in a different light, turning it 90 degrees, finding out what someone thinks, and then turning it 90 degrees. That can be very persuasive. Um, so we encounter the fact that we're dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with computers. People can think very logically, consistently, very informed, have a lot of information, but that doesn't mean that they can be easily persuaded. In fact, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
What strategies do you suggest when we use when interacting with people who lack ethics or who feel that being persuaded goes against their personal interests?
So those are very challenging moments. You know, I think I'd have to be honest with you, say there are limitations to how persuasive we can be. And one of them is if our audience turns their hearing aid off and doesn't listen at all to what we're saying, I can have all my principles go out the window. You can't really accomplish much if somebody doesn't communicate with you. Okay, so that's one important challenge. And if somebody is not only unethical, but they are also intimidating, they try to intimidate other people, bully other people, humiliate other people. Um, uh, it is very, very difficult to be persuasive for persuasion to happen. There's there's um, there's a few ways that people influence. Influence is what you're trying to have with somebody. You're trying to influence them. And what is influence? Getting somebody to do something they wouldn't otherwise do. That's to influence them. We'd love to be able to do this, okay? There's really only three ways you can influence people, I think, really. One is you command and order people. Sometimes we order people, they're going this direction, you want them to go in that direction. You say, do it because I say so. We might be in a situation where we can command. We may not be able to have that authority to command, but that's one way we influence people, okay? Do it because I say so. Another way is we negotiate with people. We bargain. We haggle. If I give you this, then you'll give me that. If you think this, then I'll think that. That's a negotiation. It's an if-then kind of situation. We bargain. Negotiation is an important way to try to get people to change their mind and be influenced. Let's make a deal. The third way is the persuasion way. I tell you things in an evocative, compelling way that tap into what you already have in your head, and then you willingly, voluntarily change your mind. We need to do all three of those. We need a toolkit that has a hammer in it. Sometimes, do it because I say so. Okay. that has a screwdriver in it. Also, if you want to build a table, a hammer is not enough. You need to negotiate. But we also want to persuade. And um, when people are unethical, it's really a question of how unethical are they and how intimidating are they and how humiliating. Incidentally, there are many leaders in the world, and you can think of some in your own country of Venezuela, and I can think of them in my country, the United States, and other places in the world who accomplish a lot with command and order and intimidation and coercion and threat. There are other ways of getting things done besides trying to persuade people and have a more civil kind of situation together, right? It's not the only way, and no negotiation, no persuasion, just somebody hammering you. Okay, that's one approach. I happen to personally think that you don't want to work for somebody like that, and you don't want to have people like that working for you. In the middle and long run, where we live our life mostly, we would much rather be an environment of persuasion if we could be. Incidentally, not just politically, but also at home. Right?